Welcome back to the channel. So today's episode, I was trying to think of a subject that is really interesting to a broader range of people. I know we kind of talk about very specific subject matters here on the channel, so I thought I would kind of open it up to the broader public by discussing wood glue today, everyone's favorite subject matter. We're going to discuss the types of wood glues used in lutherie. I'm going to do an experiment at the end of the episode. And we're also going to talk about some of the controversies with wood glue in the lutherie community. So buckle up, it's going to be wild. Okay. So I have here a guitar that is just about finished. I have to glue on the neck, and then shortly after that I'm going to be gluing on the bridge. So this is another wood species I haven't used before. This one is the oiliest wood I have ever come across. I can't tell you how many sheets of sandpaper I went through to get this one finished to the final thickness and all the steps involved with that. So I want to do some tests before I glue on the final bridge. Sometimes with oily woods, it just prevents a bond from occurring between the wood fibers to the glue. So I do use an oily wood for the bridge material. Plus, this wood being so oily, I'm concerned that the two combined may cause some problems with adhesion together. So I'll run some experiments using this wood, some of the bridge wood I use, and also the zirconi I had mentioned before. That's an oily wood too. So I'm going to just do an all-around experiment, different wood preparations and things like that to test the glue out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the final outcome with this guitar. Hopefully it sounds nice, and these woods are really unique and cool looking. I am happy how it's turning out so far, and I'll go into maybe the woods and kind of showing the guitar if it turns out. So look forward to that. But next we're going to just talk about the glues. All right, so I have here the examples of the glue I use to build a guitar. I have your traditional Titebond, just polyvinyl acetate glue, and then some examples of animal protein glues. So let's talk about animal protein glues, the reasons why I use it. The number one reason why I use animal protein glues like hot hide glue and fish glue is that I enjoy using it. I think it's cool. I like the history behind it, and it's right up my alley, just a specialized technique and specialized tools, and I just love that kind of stuff. So that should be reason enough. But I do think there are some practical reasons why it can be a superior glue in many instances. So the benefit with hot hide glue and fish glue is that it's reversible. With heat and water, it will loosen that bonded joint, and you can repair guitars or add hot hide glue, and it can self-adhere and repair. You can do that also with Titebond 2. It is reversible, but maybe not as dramatically so as the protein glues. Another benefit is that it has a high tack, meaning once you put glue on a piece of wood and adhere it to another, it doesn't slide and slip around as much. So if you've ever worked with Titebond before, you know that that is a big issue. It can be quite challenging to overcome that at times. So that's the big benefit with that. The protein glues, it can kind of stay and stick in place. It does mean that you have to get everything, all your ducks lined up and ready to go, because it's hard to kind of move it and shift it once it's in place there. A common problem that you can run into with woodworking in general is what's called creep. So under stress and strain of a glue joint, it can start to separate and actually migrate and move. So the PVA glues will creep. So under stress and strain, that joint will eventually separate over time. With animal protein glues, that does not happen. So it is immovable. It doesn't creep at all. So chair makers actually use animal protein glues for that reason. With all the racking forces that a chair undergoes, the PVA glue will give out much sooner than an animal protein glue. So my thought behind that is, on especially a bridge joint, glue joint, that's experiencing close to 150, over 150 pounds of force on that bridge. So, it's like me holding on to the bridge of a guitar. That's how much force is acting upon it. So if you have a glue that tends to creep and move under stress and strain, it makes sense to me to use a glue that is less prone to do that. And that leaves us the final topic, which is the controversial topic, is the tone of the glue. So, animal protein glues, they're exclusively used by violin makers. It used to be used exclusively by luthiers of all types until the PVAs came around, which I think that came around in the 60s, I want to say. So it hasn't been around forever. But the reason why they feel the tone is better with an animal protein glue is because it dries crystal hard. It's absolutely a hard material once it's dried, and that just allows an easier energy transfer from the bridge past the glue joint to the soundboard, ultimately making the noise that the guitar makes. So PVA glue does dry hard, but just not as hard as animal protein glues. And I think just about every luthier would admit that technically the tone is better from an animal protein glue, but they would maybe argue that it's such a small difference, it's unnoticeable or inconsequential. Now, I will push back on that a little bit, and I'm going to use an example of that. So behind me here, this is the neck actually that's going to go to that guitar. So I use slotted headstocks for my guitar, and I think it looks cool. There is that aspect of things, it's kind of a preference when it comes to the aesthetics of the guitar, but there is actually a science behind the slotted headstock, and that is that the string break angle is steeper over the nut. So it's exerting more pressure, more downward pressure on the nut, and just again allows for better energy transfer from the string down on to the bridge. So much like compounding error is an issue with woodworking, if your saw is off a degree, each cut with that saw is going to lead to a catastrophic end result. The same is kind of true with compounding benefits that you can use on the guitar. So why don't most guitar builders use a slotted headstock if it technically sounds better? It can be aesthetically driven, but more importantly, it's expensive to do this step. So it's far cheaper to do just a flat headstock. So that's the reason why they don't tend to do that. And same is true for the protein glue. Is it technically tonally more superior? Yeah. Why don't they use it? Because it's incredibly laborious to use. It's difficult to use. It's impractical. So for a guy like me making a couple guitars a year, I just enjoy the process of using it. But for big production, it's impractical to use something like that, even though tonally it's better. So if you just start adding up all these small little things that you can do, it can result in a better sounding guitar, and that's kind of what I'm striving to do here. The fish glue is kind of interesting as well. This is used in art restorations a lot now, in addition to luthiers using it. I found I enjoy using this glue a lot because it has an incredibly long open time, especially compared to the original Titebond. I have found that in woodworking that the surface layer of that Titebond can oxidize and form a kind of a gummy layer almost right away. I feel like that glue joint can sometimes be thicker as a result of that, but I've not found that to be the case with the fish glue. It has a long open time, it's easy to spread and smooth out the wood surface. The interesting thing about fish glue, it's made from the swim bladders of sturgeons. I don't know if it's used with sturgeons anymore. It's probably some other type of fish. I think sturgeons are more endangered now. But the swim bladder has a really high collagen content, and that's why it works well for glue. It is more hygroscopic, so under humid conditions, it does not work well. It will delaminate pretty quickly under really hot, humid conditions. Both of these protein glues are temperature sensitive. So for instance, if you left your guitar, heaven forbid, in a hot car, it will literally fall apart using the protein glues because it will start to deactivate the glue. But the fish glue in particular is more susceptible to humidity changes. The higher humidity is not good. But if a guitar is properly cared for and stored, that's not an issue. So yeah, that's the glues that I use, the reasons why. Hope you found that interesting. And what I'm going to do next is some experiments. I've run a few experiments in the past with the glue strength of the protein glues and things like that. I might touch on that a little bit, but we're going to be doing an experiment shortly here just to see how oily woods behave with protein glues and PVA glues, and we'll see the result. So this is just the process of making hide glue. You take the dried granules of the hide and measure it out. My particular measurement is 37 grams of water to 25 grams of hide glue. So you just measure it out and put it in the double boiler there. Once it heats up, it liquefies and it's ready to use. This is probably an example of another reason why it's impractical to use hot hide glue, because every time you mix it, it can be slightly different. Again, I kind of like that aspect of it. It's just a feel thing. You have to tweak it. If it's too thick or thin, you can add more water or more hide glue. But just a fun process, and this is how it's done. And I let the glue hydrate for at least an hour before heating it up. All right, this is the start of the experiment. So what I'm trying to determine is the bond strength of glue with oily woods. And if you've ever woodworked before, you may have heard the rule of thumb to treat an oily wood with a solvent before glue up. And the idea being to wipe away the oily surface residue of the wood in order for that glue to penetrate better to the wood fibers to create a bond. And where that came from was experiments done by the Forest Products Laboratory. And they ran a bunch of experiments, particularly in World War II, regarding adhesives and wood bonding and things like that. And it's been a while since I've read that study, but from what I remember from it is there are two takeaways. One is that if a wood is oily, to treat it with acetone before glue up, and you want to do that within 15 to 20 minutes of that solvent evaporating. Otherwise, the oils will pull back up to the surface. And two, to increase bond strength, to sand the joint prior to gluing, again within that 15-20 minute window. So with that in mind, I have a bunch of wood blanks here that I am going to treat differently. So one will be a solvent treated surface where I'm going to wipe with acetone, and another solvent being naphtha followed by mineral spirits, and then a control where I'm just going to do the sanding with no solvent preparation. And I'm going to add a qualifier to this too. The nature of this test is not to test the strength of the glue, but to determine if there is bonding occurring to the wood fibers. So you'll see what I mean in a second with that. I don't know if I overestimated the strength of my vise or underestimated the strength of the glue. Regardless, this did not work at all. So I quickly resorted to a hammer, and it was very difficult to hold the workpiece. If only I had a vise nearby to hold the workpiece, it would have been much easier. I promise you I am educated, and I don't care to admit how many times it took me to realize I could just use the vise to hold the workpiece. As you can see, much easier using the vise to hold the piece there. So I'm basically just putting strain and stress on the joint until it breaks and assessing whether or not the glue adhered to the fibers or it just sheared off where that joint is with no adhesion. So you'll see some pictures of what that looks like in a little bit. This test reinforced for me my anecdotal experience that it seemed like a solvent preparation resulted in a weaker joint than if you didn't treat it. And here are some pictures of what I'm talking about. And here are the results. So you can see here a lot of the fibers tore out. So I'd say this is a pretty good glue up. There was a section on the upper right hand side there that you can see it didn't bond intimately to the wood fiber there, but all in all, this was a pretty good joint. And this is an example of a glue up that did not bond to the wood. So the only section is that right hand side. Some wood fibers did tear out, but the rest of it is completely non-bonded and it failed at the glue joint. I did 15 glue ups, 5 control, 5 acetone preparation, and 5 naphtha and mineral spirit preparation, and only 3 glue failures resulted from that. 2 were acetone and 1 was naphtha, so all 3 failures were actually the solvent preparation. And this is another example. You can see the right hand side, there was a bond with the fibers tore out, but on the left hand side there is no bonding occurring there. So these tests, although it's super limited, did just reinforce my anecdotal experience over the years that it seems like a solvent preparation isn't all that effective, at least in my hands. All right, that was a fun little experiment. So I know it was limited in its scope, but sometimes some data is better than no data. And in this case, I was able to use the exact pieces of wood that I'm going to be gluing together, so it was actually quite useful for this particular step for me. So after that, I went ahead and glued on the heel blocks to the body of the guitar, to the sides of the guitar. So in the next video series, I'll go through how I prepare these blocks, how I glue them in, and also how we glue the kerfing to the side and prepare those. So hope you enjoy, and we'll see you next time.